and welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Chris Stashu, and I am joined by everyone's favorite movie podcaster other than myself, the host of the Kolchak Tapes and the Projection Booth, Mr. Mike White.
I'm not Mark Kermode.
I do love me some Kermode, brother.
Right?
Ooh. Yeah, Mark Kermode, dude. Oh, man, that guy. I wish I could be that guy. But I'm not Mark Kermode. I'm not Mark Kermode, and neither are you, Mike. However, we are going to talk about a film that would probably be right in his wheelhouse of films. I think he would like this movie.
I don't know. Does he like much?
I don't know. He kind of, sort of, sometimes does. It's movie to movie.
Yeah.
We're going to continue Blaxploitation month with a look at Trouble Man from 1972. Film is directed by Ivan Dixon, written by John D.F. Black, and stars Robert Hooks as the titular Trouble Man. The synopsis for the film is: things begin to unravel when a super cool black fixer is hired to straighten out some crooks.
Trouble is here. He's street smart and steel hard. He's a healer, a fixer.
My name's T, baby.
Wears $600 suits, drives a $10,000 car, and he carries two guns, one to stop trouble and one to make trouble. He was born in the ghetto and raised in the streets. He's been a man since he was a kid, and trouble is this man's name. If you're a friend of Mr. T's, you can count on him.
How's my baby?
I'm good.
But if you're not, you can count yourself out.
Couldn't give a damn who owns it or what color. Now you see that baby, I'll come back and see to you. You dig it?
If you've got trouble, call T and leave a message. Service is prompt, efficient, and deadly.
We move in on Big's business and the money comes rolling in like waves on the shore. All we gotta do is get rid of Mr. T.
He is on the streets right now.
One man, Chuck. He's just one man. Don't make him sound like a goddamn army.
He has one edge, and that's his school, but that's enough, baby, because he's thinking all the time. And if he wants your ass, he gets it.
Trouble Man is mayhem. Rub him wrong, and he'll blow up in your face.
Before you shoot my man, Abby, I didn't.
You and Jimmy gotta go away for a couple of days. Where do you want to go?
For what? What for?
I got some trouble to handle. Yeah.
This is Pete Cockrell. I want to talk to Chalky.
This is T. Chalky's dead. Now I'm coming to get your honky ass.
If you're looking for trouble, look out, 'cause trouble is here. Trouble Man. You jive him, he'll wash you away.
So, Mike, you've seen this film before. I know you have, because you're a huge fan of Blaxploitation. I am curious, what did you think rewatching Trouble Man for the Culture Cast?
I love Trouble Man, and actually I just watched it last week because I'm planning on doing an episode on Trouble Man next year, so I'm already planning ahead to February 2019, so I watched it last week, and then you asked me to be on the Culture Cast, so I rewatched it again today. This movie only gets better for me.
I had never seen it before, obviously, so I really liked it. It's better than Petey Wheatstra, but that's not hard. So, there's that. I mean, Petey Wheatstra was really a bad example of good Blaxploitation. This is a better example, but this is also very different than Petey Wheatstra.
Oh, yeah. Definitely very, very different. Now, there's a couple schools of thought when it comes to Blaxploitation. There's the man of the streets. There's like the Superfly, basically the pimps, the pushers, and then this falls into the private eye. And it's very much along the same line. And it's not a big coincidence that the same guy that wrote this also wrote Shaft the year before. and you can kind of see some Shaft-like qualities to this, but I also see a little bit of The Godfather going on in this one. And then overall, it's just a really tight thriller for me, and it really works well. And they kind of weave race into it in a really nice way where it doesn't feel like they just said, well, here's this story of this white detective, and we're just going to suddenly go in and do like a find and replace and change white to black, and then like quote unquote jive it up a little bit.
Yeah, it feels very much like Shaft. It's not a bad thing, but it definitely feels like Shaft.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Shaft fan. Like, I love the soundtrack for Shaft, and I think Richard Roundtree is really solid in it. But as a movie overall, it's not one that I go back to, whereas I would go back to Trouble Man, and I have gone back to Trouble Man. The first time I saw it, I was like, how have you not been in my life before?
Well, and that's the thing. I think Robert Hooks is a better protagonist than Shaft is. I think he also plays a kind of like a cool character. He plays like a cool customer more, if that makes sense.
Well, I think the cast overall, I mean, when you think of Shaft, you think of Richard Roundtree. There's not a whole lot of other cast members that just leap out at me. I think of Shaft almost as like the Isaac Hayes show because of how strong that score is. Right. Whereas Marvin Gaye's score, yeah, it comes in strong at the beginning with him singing the Trouble Man theme, but then it kind of cools out and it just becomes like a good music bed for the rest of the movie. It's not like it's overpowering stuff. And even, the opening song does not go on for 8 minutes, kind of like the opening of Shaft. We're in and out pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's the other thing. And also, I'm more of a fan of Marvin Gaye than I am of Isaac Hayes. So, also helps considering how Marvin Gaye did the theme and soundtrack for this movie. So, I've always been a bigger Marvin Gaye fan than Isaac Hayes fan. So,
that's fair.
Yeah. But I also, again, I think Robert Hooks is great in this movie. I think, it's a little bit of the Cotton Comes to Harlem where it's black on black villains, which again is not very representative of Blaxploitation to some extent, but then you also have one of the villains is a white guy as well. So it kind of balances out the two kind of sides of Blaxploitation.
As they would call it, it's a salt and pepper team of antagonists, yes.
Right. So when was the first time you saw this film?
I probably saw this about, maybe 5 years ago. It was really tough to find on any sort of medium for a long time. I bought a bootleg DVD off of eBay forever ago. There was like a period where you could get that and Cool Breeze and Gordon's War, like Three the Hard Way, and I can't remember. There was one other where it was like you couldn't get those legitimately, but you could get really good copies off of eBay sellers, and they were even doing their own, cover art, and it looked almost legit, but it wasn't. So that was the first time I saw it, and it was a pretty good copy. It was widescreen. It looked all right, but it wasn't, I just watched the Blu-ray today, and it wasn't the Blu-ray, but it looked pretty darn good. And with a movie like this from 1972, Ivan Dixon, he was a great, great director. And he also directed one of my other favorite films, which is Spook That Sat by the Door. And that is a fantastic film. If you haven't had a chance to see that, I really recommend that one as well.
Yeah, see, again, my whole thing is I have no experience with Blaxploitation. So these first four films that I've watched have been really all over the place in regards to quality and level of Blaxploitation in the film, if that makes sense. I mean, I watched Black Mama, White Mama, which was less Blaxploitation and more women in prison, but it did have Pam Grier in it. And then we did Cotton Comes to Harlem, which is almost like The French Connection as a Blaxploitation film. And then you have a film like Petey Wheatstraw, which is kind of embraces all of the kind of craziness, like the more crazy side of Blaxploitation, the true exploitation side of Blaxploitation. Mm-hmm. And then you have this film, which is very much in the vein of Cotton Comes to Harlem, but with a badass lead as opposed to... I mean, the characters in Cotton Comes to Harlem are badass, but this guy is more of like a cool operator than like a stern cop, like the two main characters in Cotton Comes to Harlem.
Well, if I only have one problem with Trouble Man, it's that he is he's the Lothario, but it doesn't necessarily make sense because I'd say 90% of this movie, he's with Cleo, and it seems like he has a really good, loving relationship with Cleo. But then at the very beginning, we see him with another chick, and then at the very end, he picks up this chick, and off they go, like not quite driving off into the sunset, but almost. And throughout the rest of the film, he's a one-woman guy, and it doesn't necessarily jive with me that he, it's like be one or the other. Be the guy who's constantly picking up women, waking up in the morning like Black Dynamite, and you got, however many women in the bed with you, and you're constantly just macking on women. But then it's either that or have one steady gal. And he seems to be kind of playing it both ways. So I'm just like, oh man, that's really kind of a dick move to do to Cleo, especially after he took so much care to send her out of town and get her away from the violence because she was really in danger of getting embroiled in this situation. So I don't know. That's my only critique of Trouble Man, is just that I wish that they had picked one or the other.
Yeah, that was a little strange to me because, like you said, it felt like he was supposed to be kind of tied down in a way, but then they make that a little ambiguous. And if it were me, I would have just had him be kind of like a player. I mean, that's what Shaft was. That's what most of these characters are, because it's very much like it's like wish fulfillment, right? That's what a lot of this is being able, in the 70s, it's about taking down Whitey and being a, swinging dick, cop, pimp, Mac, whatever you want to call it. And the fact that this movie kind of was in between, I think, didn't work as well, if that makes sense.
I would have liked it if he had just been with Cleo, because there's a moment in the film where he calls up this woman and she gives him some information, and it's like, okay, you can tell that they had been together, like in italics, they had been together before, and she's like, hey man, next time you're around, look me up. And it's like, okay, I kind of want him to be like, yeah, that's my old life, but now I'm with Cleo now, and now I'm, much more respectable, because he's a very respectable dude. I mean, the way that he runs his operation is really good. Like the way that we start off the movie, seeing him at this pool hall, which he's the king, as Big says later on. He's the king sitting in the chair, and he's got his right-hand man coming up to him, played by, what's his name, Bill Henderson, right? Coming up and like, hey, this is going on. He's like his consigliatore, right? And he's just like giving him the problems, and when people come up to him and they unload on him and they need his help, he assigns these things to this guy, and then off they go. So it's really nice to see the way he's taking care of the community, though he's always looking out for number one, even when the guy like needs help getting his brother out on bond. He's asking that guy for money. He's always looking out for himself. Though when it comes to the kid who fell down the stairs because of the faulty arm rail, and that he wants the landlord to take care of that stuff, or the building manager, he doesn't get any money out of the deal. He just gets the satisfaction of scaring the shit out of Mr. Carlson from WKRP and knowing that this kid is being taken care of.
I don't know. It felt like they were trying to go away from Shaft in some respects. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I don't like that, but again, is it so bad to just have a film that's essentially just Shaft again?
Well, they tried that with Shaft in Africa and Shaft's Big Score, right? But yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Would it be such a bad idea to have him just kind of doing Shaft things, but not Shaft, but a different black actor in the title role?
Well, Mr. T, as Robert Hooks is known in this, which cracked me up the first time I saw it, Mr. T, it feels like Shaft might have used to have been a cop, or at least like there was more of a relationship between him and the police, whereas he's very much more of Mr. T is very much more of an adversary to the police. The whole relationship he has with Captain Marks, very adversarial, and just the way that he comes in is just like, hey man, I know enough about, I ain't past, how's the line go? I ain't past the bar, but I know a little bit, and you're not charging me for shit. So he's like, I'm hitting the bricks, pal. I'm out of here. And just that way. And it helps, too, that William Smithers as Captain Marks, he has very much no charisma whatsoever. He's like the whitest guy in the world. Like you couldn't find a whiter guy to be the police captain in this movie. He is like, he makes Ralph Waite seem like, Ralph Waite is like down. He's got super soul compared to the captain of the police. He's really not good.
He is generic Whitey in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Beyond generic Whitey. Almost to a fault. Which, again, is the point of these movies. It's supposed to be a juxtaposition of, not Whitey and Whitey, because the entire black community in this movie is supposed to side with and should side with Mr. T.
Well, Mr. T, he doesn't seem to have any problems with crime going on in the neighborhood, Mr.
Which
T,
is a little weird.
Right. I make my living from crime in the neighborhood, Mr. T. Yeah, he has no problems with that. He's just kind of like, as long as there's no outbreaks of violence and threatening, like, my people kind of thing, he seems to be okay with that. But again, he's always looking out for number one. So when Paul Winfield and Ralph Waite come to him as Chalky and Pete, and I love that Paul Winfield's name is Chalky. It's fantastic. When they come to him and they're like, hey, our craps games are getting ripped off and we need you to look out for this stuff. He's just like, okay, yeah, one night steak. And they balk at that immediately. And then he's like, okay, yeah, $10,000. They're like, what? We don't make $10,000. He's like, you know my price. You know where I'm at, man. Fuck off. I'm out of here. And I just love that he's such like big dick swing it. Just like, I know my game. You guys got to come. If you're coming to me, you got to pay my price. And I just really appreciate that. And like I said, he doesn't seem to have any problem that these things are going on because things seem to be pretty smooth right now. And he wants to keep those works smooth. Like, even when it seems like there's a problem between them and Big, who's played by Julius Harris, he wants to keep that, let's solve this. Let's have a conversation rather than a gang war.
Well, yeah, and then obviously the whole crux of the movie is centered around the fact that they trick him into becoming their hitman, quote unquote, but not really.
Right.
And so, again, for me, the progression of the movie works so well in that it's not just, Whitey, get Whitey, which is what I was honestly expecting this month, was a lot of get Whitey. So, and I'm glad that it wasn't, because like you said, salt and pepper villains, so... But it is kind of weird, right, that, like, the black character in this movie has no problem with there being crime in his neighborhood.
No, because, again, he is very much like The Godfather, where it's just like, okay, you can do all of these things. Like, Don Corleone has no problem with the other five families, right? As long as they're just kind of doing their own thing, and as long as they're not messing, it's drugs. He doesn't like people being involved with drugs.
Right,
and
that's
drugs,
the whole crux of The Godfather.
Right. And drugs are not even an issue in this film, which is an interesting thing because drugs are such a part of blaxploitation in other blaxploitation films, but in this one it's not. It's mostly like he mentions prostitution because he talks about how is it affecting you, your prostitution, when people are giving it away for free these days. That he brings that up, but for the most part it's just gambling and violence, but mostly just gambling. So he has no problem with gambling, and I guess I can kind of respect that.
Yeah, again, that's what I like about this character, is that it is a little bit more, I guess, different than Shaft in a way, because Shaft wouldn't stand even for any of this going on.
No. I mean, Mr. T makes his money. That's how he makes his living, is gambling, being a pool shark.
All right, well, let's take a break, and when we get back, we'll finish up talking about Trouble Man. Who is Carl Kolchak?
He's a reporter.
Now that is news, Vincenzo. News! And we are a newspaper. We are supposed to print news, not suppress it.
With the INS.
What's an INS?
Independent news service, sir, founded in 1904 by Enrico Paluzzi.
Who seems to have a nose for the strange and unusual.
Well, last year in Las Vegas, I uncovered a series of murders that turned out to have been committed by a vampire.
And what is the Kolchak Tapes?
It's a podcast.
All about Carl Kolchak.
What's a Kolchak?
The Night Stalker.
And where can you get it?
On iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at www.kolchaktapes.com.
As foolish a game as any that Gory the Ghoul could make up.
Socks don't have to come in just black and white, and at Jilly's Socks and Such, you can find not only that unique pair of sassy socks, but also gifts for any occasion. Started by former teacher Lori and former student, now namesake Jillian, their store has a pair of socks for every event, personality, and interest. Be it a snarky pair for work, a pair emblazoned with your favorite sports team, or just something silly for lounging, Jilly's Socks and Such can have you sliding into your new favorite pair of socks today. I just recently picked up a pair of Bigfoot socks that are about as badass as they are comfy, and they are a perfect addition to my growing collection of socks. They are located at 3900 Old Cheney Road, Suite 202, Lincoln, Nebraska, and online at jillysocks.com. Mention the Culture Cast and get 15% off your next purchase at Jilly's, and remember, let your socks do the talking at Jilly's Socks and Such.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
Week after week, I'm mesmerized by the focus given great films and questionable films alike. But every episode is a learning and entertaining experience.
This is hands down the best movie podcast. They cover so many different genres across so many years, from obscure movies to blockbusters.
If there's only one podcast about movies and cinema that you listen to, make it this one.
The Projection Booth Podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
All right, so we are back and we were talking about Trouble In. So, Mike, I am curious, where does this film kind of rank with other blaxploitation films that you've seen?
This is one of the better ones. You know, this is, like I said, this is one I go back to often. This is up there for me with stuff like Coffee. And I don't even consider Spook Who Sat by the Door to be a blaxploitation film. I guess it has blaxploitation elements to it because of the time that it was set and some of the thematics to it, but really I don't even count it as that. Like if I'm thinking like black action film with some exploitation elements, this is up there for me. Of course, you know, my favorite of all times is Black Shampoo. You know, this is up there like I said, this one I really go back to often. It's not like Superfly I don't go back to. Some of the other Pam Grier films I don't necessarily go back to too often. This is up there with like Cleopatra Jones or, you know, Black Belt Jones, any of the Jones films, I suppose, or Three the Hard Way. Like this is one that has great repeatability, and I think a lot of that comes from the direction, the music, and then those performances. And a lot of that, of course, too, is from the writing, because it's a very strong story, very well told. I like the way that, like I said, it's not just like layering on, you know, like blaxploitation tropes onto what could have been a white story. And that, like the first time I saw Shaft, it kind of felt like that, because they're kind of almost like testing the waters of like, will this fly or not? Will this super fly or not? But with this one, like, it feels much more real. And I love the way that he's just like, hey, up yours, mother, and all these kind of things. I'm just like, yeah, right on. Like, I wish I could see this with an audience. I'd be like hooting and hollering and cheering up this, you know, because it's like every time he gets those little zingers in, especially on the captain, it's just like, yeah, fuck you. And when Ralph Waite as Pete drops the N-word and Paul Winfield's just like, man, he's going to feed that word to you backwards. I was just like, yeah, right on, man. And like when he gets it, that's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, I would probably say this is the best blaxploitation film that I've seen so far out of the ones that we've watched this month. It's kind of got that balance of the things that I wanted in it versus having those aspects of blaxploitation that I was expecting.
Right.
And that was the thing about P.D. Wheatstraw, was it was almost too much. They kind of ignored plot for kind of goofy, over-the-top nonsense. And so this movie, it has a little bit of the kind of tongue-in-cheek humor, but at the same time, it's a good story. And again, when you've got Robert Hooks as the lead, he does a fantastic job as the badass, as this film's Shaft, as it were.
I would say if you're gonna carry on in this way, like I gave you a couple good titles to check out, but check out like Truck Turner is another great one. Again, solid direction, and that one is really fascinating. It's got, again, some great criminals to it, and Nichelle Nichols is one of the most dangerous people in that movie. And to hear Uhura from Star Trek just, man, her language makes me blush. It is so blue in that movie. It is fantastic. And then Yaphet Kotto is in that movie as well, and he's great. And that Now, that is an Isaac Hayes film, and he does the music as well as stars in it, but that's one of those where you're just like, now I see why Isaac Hayes was a star at the time. Willie Dynamite is fascinating. It's in that pimp category, and it's like one of the more depressing blaxploitation films. There's times where it feels like a Jack Chick comic to me because it's just like all of these horrible things just keep happening to Willie. So he's not like the strongest protagonist in the world, but it's interesting. And then I know you saw P.D. Wheatstraw, and that's like the one Rudy Ray Moore film that I do not go back to, but I would recommend like Avenging Disco Godfather, Dolomite, or the sequel to Dolomite, Human Tornado. That's not nearly as goofy as P.D. Wheatstraw. Like there's some comic moments, but those are not comedy films. Those are more action films. Like there's a moment in Human Tornado that is straight up comedy, but for the most part, like you're going to get some comedy in there. You're going to get some of Rudy doing his act, but for the most part, it's going to be like him trying to be a blaxploitation hero. So I recommend those.
Yeah, that was the thing that I talked with Mike about on that podcast, was that P.D. Wheatstraw was not the best representation of kind of Rudy Ray Moore's better films, if that makes sense. It was a bad blaxploitation film.
Yeah. And some people will swear up and down by Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, and it's an interesting film. And I think it's going to be playing theatrically, or it's starting to make a tour around because there's a new Blu-ray of it coming out from Vinegar Syndrome. It's not one that I go back to, but it was a groundbreaking film. So you could proceed with caution on that one. If you've never seen Uptown Saturday Night, that one is kind of an interesting one because I was reminded of Uptown Saturday Night while I was watching Trouble Man, because it's more from the point of view of the gamblers. Like these two guys who get ripped off at this game, and they get their wallet stolen, and they have a winning lottery ticket inside of one of their wallets. And it's Sidney Poitier directing, and it's Poitier and Bill Cosby as our main heroes. And Harry Belafonte,
not aged well, Mike. Come on, Mike.
Harry Belafonte, I believe, is the bad guy in that one, because there's two of those. Because there's like Let's Do It Again is another one of those, but I think Uptown Saturday Night is the first one, and I really recommend that movie. Now I know Bill Cosby has an odor around him these days, but I still like his early work. I still really appreciate it. So I kind of grew up with the guy, so I still appreciate that movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Bill Cosby, I think, now has a stain on him.
I mean, I still watch Polanski films. What you gonna do?
I think everybody does. People always talk about Rosemary's Baby, so.
Yeah. I don't know if that was because it was before the Troubles or not, but yeah.
Well, it's like Woody Allen. That's the whole thing with the Me Too thing, to some extent, is do you automatically discount everything?
Right.
I mean, I'm in the camp of certain people yes, certain people no. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, you talk about Bill Cosby, you talk about people like Polanski or Woody Allen or even Kevin Spacey. How do you remove those two things? And I mean, you can't. So it's not, now it's like bringing up Cosby or Polanski is just kind of like, it's like a pox upon any movie or anything. And I think it's kind of unfortunate because I love Annie Hall. Like, I'm just gonna be honest.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I love that movie.
So were you familiar with the guy that played Pete in this movie?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Because for me, like, I grew up watching the Waltons, and this was right around the same time that the Waltons were on. So, like, when I went back and I saw this and I saw him, like, in full Waltons mode, like, because he went on to be, like, Jethro Leroy Gibbs's father on NCIS. That was, like, one of his last roles, and that he was that for years and years on NCIS. But he was the dad on the Waltons, where he was pretty squeaky clean. And then to see him as Pete, this real slime bag, in here, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then I was looking up Ivan Dixon, because I knew Ivan Dixon, who directed this, mostly from his acting, because he was Kinchlow, I think was the character's name on Hogan's Heroes, but he directed tons of stuff, including a bunch of the Waltons. So I'm thinking he must have really gotten along with Ralph Waite. And then Ralph Waite, like he's been in a bunch of great stuff, but he was like hardcore Democrat, which was kind of cool. I thought he was on the blacklist, but I was wrong about that. He was just like very outspoken politically, which probably got him into a little bit of trouble, but not too much. But yeah, it was pretty cool seeing him in this.
I like the cast more than I like the cast of Cotton Comes to Harlem as well. I like Robert Hooks more than I like the two leads, because the two leads in Cotton Comes to Harlem, they're a little kind of one note, and so Robert Hooks for me works a little bit better. And also the villain in Cotton Comes to Harlem I didn't think was kind of as well played as Paul Winfield. I mean, Paul Winfield is great in this movie. I mean, he's great in everything I've seen him in. Mars Attacks, Terminator. I just always remember him from Star Trek II Wrath of Khan as one of the guys who
hell yes
worm in his ear.
Oh yeah, he is fantastic in that. Yeah, there's so many crossovers with Star Trek with this movie. It's amazing because John D.F. Black, that wrote the screenplay, he wrote The Naked Now, The Naked Time? No, The Naked Now, which then was The Naked Time on Next Gen, right? And then Robert Hooks was in Star Trek 3, and like you said, Paul Winfield, Star Trek 2, and I'm trying to think if there were other connections, but it was just like, wow, this is kind of weird how many people had crossed over into Star Trek land.
Yeah, there were a lot of them in this movie. Star Trek land is in full effect in this film, for sure.
If you want just even a good like primer of Blaxploitation, just even looking at Julius Harris's filmography, he was in so many Blaxploitation films. Even the Blaxploitation version of James Bond, Live and Let Die, which was pretty great, where I think he's got a mechanical arm.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and he was, well, this isn't Blaxploitation, but he's in one of my favorite films from the 70s, The Taking of Pelham 123, and there's some good back and forth between him and Walter Matthau in that one.
Yeah, I remember him as Tee-Hee from Live and Let Die, so that's what I remember him as.
Right?
Tee-Hee. Yeah, it was Tee-Hee.
Yeah, did he have like I don't know, like a Caribbean accent in that movie?
I don't think he said anything in that movie.
Okay.
I think that's what it was. He didn't say anything. The strong silent enforcer, that's what his character was in Live and Let Die. I haven't seen Live and Let Die in forever.
No, it's one of those, like when it's on TV, I'll watch it. I mean, God, Domino, she's still pretty hot.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so check this out. Julius Harris was in Shaft's Big Score, the third Shaft movie. He was in Superfly, Trouble Man, which we're talking about, Black Caesar, Hell Up in Harlem. Let's see, what else? Let's Do It Again, that I just mentioned. Friday Foster. Now, Friday Foster, I'm not as big a fan of that as I am of other Pam Grier stuff, but still pretty good. So yeah, he's in some major Blaxploitation films.
One of the who's who character actors for Blaxploitation films.
Exactly. Yeah. And then he went on to work with Sam Raimi in Crime Wave, which was interesting, and in Darkman.
And Darkman. I was about to say, and Darkman. That's one of the things I remember seeing him in when I was like growing up, was Darkman.
And don't forget one of my favorites, Prayer of the Roller Boys.
No idea what that is.
Oh, Day of the Rope. It's coming.
Don't even know what that is, Mike. You always bring up these movies I've never even heard of.
And Bill Henderson, I kept thinking of him. He's not the judge from A Few Good Men, but he looks like him. But he's the black guy from City Slickers, and he's also where he plays a father. And then I think he's also a father in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. So he was great in both of those as well. But he doesn't show up as often as I'd like. Apparently he was like a big time soul singer, which I had no idea. No. And I like that line when he's like, "They bent my tin leg."
Yeah, I like him in everything I've seen him in, because obviously I am a huge fan of Buckaroo Banzai. So
hell yes.
Yeah, Buckaroo Banzai is it's one of those movies. Just one of those movies that you either get it or you don't. And man, if you don't get it, I'm sorry, but it's great. It's the best thing Peter Weller's ever done, even over RoboCop. Wow,
those are some bold words, my friend, but I appreciate them.
Those are some bold words, but I'm okay with saying it for sure.
Yeah.
So what would you give Trouble Man out of 5?
Oh, out of 5, I'd give it a 5. I mean, I've watched this movie 4 or 5 times now, and I love it more every time I watch it.
Yeah, I would give it like a 4. I think it's a fun movie. It doesn't take itself too seriously. There's a little bit of kind of tongue-in-cheekness, but at the same time, it is kind of in the same vein as a film like Shaft or Cotton Comes to Harlem. And I think this is another kind of good example of blaxploitation. So I would give it like a 4 out of 5 as well. And Robert Hooks is great. So that's what I enjoyed about it the most was Robert Hooks' performance and it kind of dialing it in as opposed to last week with Petey Wheatstraw. It was just like, we don't even give a shit.
Isn't there fast motion in Petey Wheatstraw?
Yes.
Okay. I can remember like a fast motion sex scene maybe, and him wearing like a devil costume or somebody wearing a devil costume, or it's just like red PJs or something.
Yeah, there's also like a Benny Hill moment at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Well, I would ask you what the Rotten Tomatoes score is, but unfortunately, Rotten Tomatoes seems to be down. They probably got hacked by WB because they were talking bad about the DC movies. So we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast instead.
I know who you are. You're the attorney whose family they killed.
Not they.
My father.
Lántalos.
And now you hunt them.
Adios.
There's proof the cartel helped the terrorists get to the border.
The president's adding drug cartels to the list of terrorist organizations.
You can understand how that will expand our ability to combat them.
You want to see this thing through? I'm gonna have to get dirty.
Dirty is exactly why you're here.
You're gonna help us start a war.
With who?
Everyone. No rules this time.
Your objective is to start a war between the Mexican cartels, not with the Mexican government.
This girl was witness to the mission, correct?
Yes, sir.
We can't risk her falling into the wrong hands. Clean the scene.
They want me to cut ties. You gotta get rid of her.
I can't do that.
Don't put me in that situation.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
I'm gonna need a strike team, 2 Blackhawks, drones with attack capability. Where's the coup? Mexico.
You have no reason to trust me. But trust in me is how you're gonna survive.
Good luck.
Luck doesn't live on this side of the border.
That's right. On the next Culture Cast, we're going to be talking about Sicario, Day of the Soldado, a film that's been getting pretty good reviews, surprisingly, I would say. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Are you going to go see it, Mike?
Probably not. I haven't seen the first one, so I'd be completely lost in the sequel.
You should watch the first one.
Okay.
It's pretty good. I liked it. I think it's a pretty good movie. Denis Villeneuve. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of, what's that movie? Arrival, Contact.
Oh, which I liked.
It was a little but I like Sicario. It was fun. It's a good movie. So we'll be talking about that. Until then, what have you been up to, Mr. White?
Working on the Kolchak tapes with you, doing the projection booth. I'm recording an episode that is going to be coming out in September tonight because it's fresh in my head, talking about Exorcist 2, The Heretic. So
that movie is rough. You and I both know it is.
It is. You'll be happy to know that Trouble Man does not have a thermometer.
Oh, good.
The audience score is 64%.
Well, that's good.
But it does not have a thermometer to it.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah. As opposed to Pacific Rim Uprising, which is at a steady 43%.
And you can follow me over on Twitter at Culture Stash. You can follow the website over at cultureshock.com. We're also at The Culturecast and culturecast.com. Head on over to theculturecast.com where you can find out more about today's episode. You'll also find links in the episode description below to Twitter and to Facebook and to iTunes where you can rate and review the show, and to our Patreon where you can kick a couple dollars our way if you like what we're doing. Every little bit helps. Big thanks as always to Eric and Wavoka for their intro music, and to my good buddy Justin for the outro music, and to Mike for sitting down and talking a good Blaxploitation film with me.
You're welcome.
And make sure to catch us on the next Culturecast.
You know how we do, I'm just two-step, drink in my right hand, phone in my other hand, getting to the money, oh man, two-step, posted with the crew, yeah, you know how we do.
Hey, two-step, you know what I'm saying, 1, 2, 1, 2.